back. I'm here to talk about hyperfeminism and toxic masculinity. Aren't those lovely, beautiful subjects to talk about? Doesn't that make your heart feel warm, cozy, loving? It's so beautiful that you can hear the nails of the chalkboard being scratched right now as we speak. One thing about, and I'm going to take toxic masculinity first. A lot of it is historical, but as in terms of America and possibly the world, it really started in the 60s, with the drug and sexual revolution, you know, and toxic masculinity is what it is guys overplaying their hand being masculine, full of testosterone. They don't care about what women think. Women are sexual objects. Women are, you know, subversive. All of the above. Every checkbox that you could think negative with women, that's what toxic masculinity as a phrase means. Now, the hyperfeminism is kind of what women tend to think men are being portrayed, being the boss, being in control, having all of the say, being the breadwinner, having people bow to them, whatever. And it's like my body's my temple, everything else, you know. So every checkbox with, the hyperfeminism, you can go right down the list on that one. And again, that's been a issue that's been developing over eons. But you have to say probably around the 1800s, mid to late 1800s, is when it really started getting predominant, with women wanting to have their equal share of the pie. Now, mind you, this is a gender thing. It's not a race thing. It's not a. It has nothing to do with anything other than gender. So if you're looking at this video for, you know, LGBTQ reference or something else, or, you're black, you're Asian, you're this, you're that, it may include that, but that's not what the point of this video is. The point of the video is to describe how we've gotten to this point where everybody is starting, you know, at each other's throats about who should control the house, who should be the breadwinner, who should be, you know, the head of the family. Um, are we going off of a biblical view? Are we going off of a societal view? Are we going off of a I do what I want type of a view, more of an anarchist type of a deal? Here's the thing. All of this, I'm going to start with the 60s and move forward. So the video might get kind of long, you know, and just follow me here. Be in my mind for a little bit here, and just listen. And then judge at the end. Comment with whatever you want. As long as you like the video. You can call me an idiot or whatever. I don't care. I'm a big boy. I can take it. But the thing is, when it comes to both genders going against each other, I'm going to blame one source. I blame the men, believe it or not. And I'm not caping up for women. I'm not pandering towards women by saying that, because you got your issues too. Okay? In the 60s, once you had this drug and sex revolution, it's like, why should we have a nuclear family? Why can't we just have love and peace everywhere? Why can't we just smoke the pipe? And hell, if I want to have 5 women, I can have 5 women. If a woman want to have 5 men, she can have 5 men. If she wants to have a little bit of both, fine. If he wants to have a little bit of both, that's fine. Okay, it's all about peace and love and everything else. But then there's a problem that comes out of that. Kids. You lay down, man, woman, You lay down a few times, you might have a kid there in like the next year. I don't know. Maybe it's called breeding. I don't know. Um, a few times, you might just have a one night stand. A year later, Junior's running around. The princess is running around. Whatever. Things happen. Here's where I start blaming the men. There was a mentality, and I can only speak from the 70s, but I know it started from the 60s, where I've heard different guys of different races, you know, different cultures. Sometimes it's an environmental thing when it comes out of the city, maybe out of the country, rural areas, and so forth. Usually not more well off folks, but it happens because they had their sex parties and everything else. They had this mentality that they was going to get with a particular woman and they wanted her to bear his kid. And that was the predominant mentality. It was like they didn't want to just have sex with her, they wanted her to get pregnant with the kid, you know? And obviously, the dad didn't want anything to do with the child. He just wanted her to have his child. And I've seen it, I've heard it. It's an environmental thing, you know. And that happened over and over again. Here's another problem out of that. The woman actually fell in love with this guy, even though he was, preaching all this bravado and he's acting like he's this alpha male that he could get any woman and every woman wants him, so forth and so on. Whenever he was hurt in a relationship, somebody in that family told him, instead of you trying to find another girl to replace her, you need to get 10 women to replace her. And that was the mentality. It was like, hey, if it doesn't work with this one, I'm going to get 10 and I'm going to do all of them. And I don't care if they get pregnant or not. You know, because in that time frame, you used to see a lot of unwanted pregnancy ads. Abortion became legal in the 70s. You start seeing different things happen and change because there was a societal shift. You know, there are certain responsibilities with having sex that people did not think of. Then you had a whole thing about STDs. I still remember the ads. Back in the day when people would be like, man, she burnt me, blah, blah, blah. I'll, it's a disgusting story, but I'll tell it anyway. One of my good friends, we all had went out one night. We was bowling, went to Bob's Big Boys, stuff like that. I remember he kept bitching about how he got burnt by this one girl, you know, um, and he needed to go to the doctor to get penicillin to correct the burn. And people of that time would know what it is, and you can look it up yourself and so forth. So I remember I mean, we didn't all, but you've been riding around all day and so forth. You've been hanging out. We just finished bowling, had some drinks, whatever. We decided to go to Bob's Big Boy. And this was in Maryland. And I remember we went there and went to the urinal, because it was like 20 urinals there. And I'm at a stall, like 4 stalls down from one of my good friends back then. He screamed to the top of he screamed to the top of his lungs like he was being raped or whatever. And he was like, that bitch. That has happened to so many guys. They had chlamydia, they had the claps, they had this, they had that. All those STDs from the 70s and 80s started happening, because of, this free will and sex. women started taking the pill. Women started doing all kinds of stuff to prevent themselves from getting pregnant because guys didn't want to put a rubber on and so forth. But guys still had this mentality of getting women pregnant just because they wanted to say, you know, almost like cattle. Like, I've put this woman into my domain. And it was a control thing because they had no intent of taking care of that child. They just wanted a piece of ass from the woman, excuse the language, but that's all that it was, you know? And unfortunately, women, being women, fell in love with this guy, the wrong type of guy that does this. And the more that he pushed her off, the more that she wanted to be pushed on because she didn't want to be rejected. This is like 80% of the relationships. Then there was a turn that started happening because on jobs, women wasn't getting promoted. Women was being treated certain ways. Not every organization was this way and so forth. Women were being put into only these roles. They were secretaries, which is equivalent to administrative or executive assistants nowadays. They was only put into, if they got to be a supervisor, it wasn't like they were never VP. They were never this. They were never that. And mind you, you will see a lot of outliers depending on what areas of the country you're talking about and so forth and so on. And there were very few women that actually had high level positions throughout the nation. And I blame guys for that. But they would have the women there telling them strat strategic wise how to run their companies and how to do this and how to do that. They had far more intelligence than what a lot of these guys looked at them with. And the excuse all the time with the women were emotional. Oh, well, she can't handle this pressure because she'll cry and break down. That was one excuse. What happens if she gets pregnant? Then we're going to be without her for several months. You know, she'll be out for like 6 to 8 months. She'll never work as much as a man will work. All of this stuff was the conversation then, and it's probably still a conversation now. I don't know how it is in the working world now. I've been out of it for a few years, and I'm glad I am. But that's the environment a lot of these women were going through. And I think about the song, What Have He Done For Me Lately? Then women started thinking about that. Like, what has he done? And then you think about independent woman and stuff like that. There was a shift that happened where a woman was like, look, we need to hold these men more accountable for relationships and the kids that come out of these relationships. Child support went up, and a lot of guys bitched about it, was like, hey, I didn't want that kid anyway. And they were willing to pay for abortions, which they did, which now a lot of them complain, well, I wanted to have a kid. I didn't want to abort the kid. You know, it was a lot of smoke and mirrors back then. Because once that child support thing came in there, and guys had to be held to a different standard because they wouldn't do it on their own, the nuclear family started breaking up, you know? And a lot of things started falling apart. People who were unsatisfied in relationships all of a sudden decided, well, shit, if I can't get a good woman, maybe I'll get a good man. That's what some guys started thinking. I think other things happened in there, but I'm not judging. Women started doing the same thing. You know, she makes me feel better than him. I mean, I'm not making this up. This is how society has changed over the decades. So once equality came into the mix, that's when a lot of things started changing because it was never equal. Women realized they carried the kid for almost a year, and the guy is doing whatever he wants, and the guy's not being responsible. If guys were more responsible and actually stood in there with the woman and the kid and stopped thinking that, okay, now that she's pregnant, I can mess around with 5 or 6 different other women, it changed how relationships worked. Okay? Women wanted to fall in love, wanted to have the family, wanted to be there. Not all women. I'm not going to, you know, put out that stick or whatever. But the ones that did were unfulfilled. And they decided to change. Now, people are going to start saying, well, what about the church and stuff like that? Well, the problem is a lot of the guys in the church were doing a lot of that stuff. A lot of preachers, you know, I can't speak for all communities, but blacks did the same thing as whites, whites did the same thing as blacks. A lot of the guys in the church were probably gay. And they hid themselves within the church to hide the fact that they were. That's one thing. Then there's another side of it where there was a lot of guys that hid within the church that had other women out there and had other families out there. Okay? People that was in Hollywood. Obviously, they had so many groupies, whatever else. They was having kids with them. Politicians, same thing. People in the military. You had all these kids overseas, you had these kids over here. You know, it was no different. It's like, hey, that's the fruit of war. That's the benefit of, you know, representing your country and military and so forth. So you add all these extra things that's happening. Women start to think, what is my real value? What am I to whoever I'm dating? And instead of them just falling head over heels for a guy like they used to, now it's like they're holding the guys to a higher standard. And then the guys are like, well, I don't want a woman that's acted this way, even though I may have caused a problem. You'll have society tell you that these women have lost their minds, but because of the hyper feminism, but who caused them to act that way? When you have guys that are courting you, wanting you, and then all of a sudden you get impregnated by one of them, and or you marry them and they have 3 other women that's out there, you tend to get a little bit jaded and bitter after a while, especially if it's generational. Your grandmother was part of this. Your mother was part of this. Now you're in the same cycle. And then you have the government that kind of caters to it because it's like, what are we going to do with these kids out here? Welfare starts getting involved, WIC, TANF, all kinds of stuff that keeps people within the system, usually women. All right, some of these women started thinking, if I can't find a good man, I'll find a good program. And they'll get involved with that. And hell, I knew one woman in Maryland. She actually planned out to have enough kids to keep her on the system until she's able to get Social Security. So she would literally have a kid spaced out in time, and she was an attractive woman. And she's like basically like, hey, come here and do this. And she planned out her kids. She had 7 kids now. till she turned 65. And all of those kids are one taken care of because of the government, because of welfare, Section 8, so forth and so on. And she's about 60 some years old now. I mean, this started years ago, obviously. All right. So, I mean, if she's not in her 50s, she's in her 60s now. And she planned this out because of, guess what? Men. We caused this problem. So, things are generational. Once it started with that first generation, oh, it's all party time, drugs, drugs, sex, whatever. Then the kids that came behind that is like, well, daddy might be home and blah, 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 blah. Then you go with the generation after that, you don't even know who the hell the dad is. You see what I'm saying? And it's because women used to be raised, their body was a temple. Don't let anybody in that temple unless, you're married, whatever. Stay a virgin for as long as you can stay a virgin. I mean, that's what was being preached, you know. But then on the side, you got a guy that's older that's heading on this preteen. Yeah, you look so pretty in that dress. Wow. Look at that. You're such a beautiful little girl. Wait till you become a woman, you know? And I'm not trying to be funny with it, but that's how they would talk to them. And then, the little girl, she's blushing and all that because she never heard that stuff before. Because you're talking about a different time, not no social media and stuff like that. And she's being coached into being this guy's side chick, really. She's thinking main, he's thinking side, you know. We talk about the same thing now with the LGBTQ community. You know, it's the G word that nobody wants to talk about. GR. You know what I'm saying? It's the same thing that happened back then, but it was a whole different circumstance. Okay. But men allowed it to happen. Men started doing this because they use sex as a controlling mechanism. And unfortunately, it wasn't always other men that said that. I can think how my aunts, older cousins, even my mom sometimes would tell me, oh, you need to get a woman and do this and do that. And don't get married until you're 30 some years old. And my mom was a purported Christian telling me this stuff about women because women tend to tear each other down. I don't care how much solidarity they have, they will tell another woman how bad they are. That's their fatal flaw. They don't stick together as much as you think they do. They'll talk about that girl, how, oh, she ain't all that. She's this, she's that, and they'll support the ones that's not as society attractive because they don't see them as a threat. Okay? That's part of this hyper feminism that nobody talks about is the women that turn on each other that is pretty up there. And they know that woman looks pretty damn good when that expression changed like what are you looking at, and they do stuff like that. But when that woman ain't attractive, oh, you go, girl. That's what I'm talking about. Look at her. She's putting it all out there. Blah 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 blah. Oh, she's a queen. You know, when they're not a threat, they're queens. When they are threats, they're hoes. And then on the man side of things, with hip hop and so forth, when we got to the point, you think about it, we transition from singing ballads And I'm talking about all of us. I ain't talking about just blacks. I'm talking about all men. We were singing ballads saying how, the moon is here and we take you out on the lake and we, you know, show you some love. We had dinner, wine, whatever. It was like, oh, it was a fantastical time to I'm gonna take you to the Super 8 and I'm gonna make it great. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's a whole different mentality. Then once they started cursing on the songs, then it's like how they gonna do you as opposed to just fantasizing about it. We've come to this, and men did that. They did that. It wasn't the women, it was the men. Women get blamed for it, for putting themselves in that position, but it's that L thing that keeps coming out. And I'm not talking about lesbian, I'm talking about love. Because they love that guy so much because women have an insecurity about them. Men have insecurities too. Women's insecurities are always about, you know, being loved and feeling like they belong and comfort. Men's insecurities turn into loyalty and being appreciated. You know, a guy would take appreciation over love any day of the week. Meaning, like, you don't have to sit over there and say, baby, I love you. I mean, a guy likes to hear it, but when they appreciate your mind or your skills and your bravado, it's like, yeah, man, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. That's how a guy is. And women, no matter how much you bitch about doing the flowers and giving, hugs and stuff like that, they want to feel comfort. They want to feel like they belong and that they're loved and they're treated like a queen. Because once they melt in a guy's hands, it's like they will virtually do anything that guy wants her to do, as long as she knows that she's the only one, you know? And guys ruin that because women get to the point where it's like, hell, they want action and equal and opposite reaction too. And once you start from the 60s, and I don't even care if this video get banned, I'm just telling the truth. Once you start from the 60s and you get all the way here into the 2020s, you talk about 6 decades of this. So you have a few generations in there that only knows the negative side of love, not even the beginning part of it, where you probably could find a decent guy and find a decent woman. And they're out there. I'm not going to sit over there and say this whole world is a cesspool. But if you watch certain venues and media and social media, especially, you don't think there's anybody worth 20 cents out there. None. It's shit. Friends that you've known for years, you be like, they ain't shit now. They were all that back then. It's like you reading all of this stuff that they posted. Ain't none of it worth a damn. So this hyper feminism is coming for a control more so than an accomplishment. And they're fighting not just for equality, but to prove that they belong. And you're not going to shake the sexual stigma from guys being a feminist because guys are visual. Guys only think in certain areas. And at this point, you have guys that are either quiet because they don't feel like dealing with the nonsense, or you turning out a whole bunch of beta males where you don't know what the hell you're going to get. Okay? The other side of the coin, when it comes to women, and I might have to do another video and so forth to add on to everything that I'm talking about today. On the other side of the coin, you have women that says, well, I don't need to be queen, I need to be king. Because he ain't gonna be there anyway, and if he is there, he ain't worth, him taking the lead because he don't know what the hell he's talking about anyway, you know? And women feel in their head that they got to fill two roles. That didn't, that wasn't the case 40 years ago. It's the case now because you had these successive generations that came out of the 60s that feel like, okay, these men ain't nothing, even if they are something. And even the good ones are starting to get ratcheted out and so forth. Because before that, some single moms, way back when, whether they were widowed or the husband left or whatever, they would remarry. They would literally remarry and try to have that nuclear family that everybody talks about keep going on. Nowadays, it's like if they even get married, if they even have kids, and mind you, don't have kids if you can't handle the responsibility. That's anybody. That's me, that's you, that's anybody else. If you, I have kids, by the way, but the thing of it is, if you're not ready for them, don't have them. And if you're afraid of having them, don't have sex. Don't put yourself in a position where you're going to have to invest. It ain't 20 years. It ain't 26 years. It ain't 30 years. It's your entire life dealing with that kid because even if you're not around, there's always the thought of that kid being around. Okay? It's a lifetime responsibility just like anything else. I mean, because just because the kid turns a certain age doesn't mean all of a sudden, like a video game, they just disappear and that's the end of it. No, they're an active part of your life. They're ingrained forever. And not to get to a biblical sense of things, because that's not what this is about. But people used to have pre-60s. Church was a fundamental part of every family's life. And once that eroded, and trust me, the church is like totally to blame for it. That's the one thing that people won't tell you out there, how bad the church has messed up. Again, there's an exclusivity, you know, I know I stumble over my words sometimes, that the church had that held people accountable. And then when people didn't want to have that accountability anymore, guess what? You start having chaos. Chaos fills the roles of control. Chaos fills the roles of everything that is normalized, civilized, and so forth. And control is a bad word because the thing of it is, you want to actually have traditions without having a whole bunch of control to it. You want to naturally do things. You want to naturally belong. You want to be non judgmental and let things work as they are. But when things go to one extreme or the other extreme, guess what? You know, something is going to come in that nobody else wants and makes everything, right, even if it's wrong, because there has to be a balance there. So, all of the stuff that you're seeing that's going on started off with the sexual revolution, the drug revolution, and look at where the hell we are today. Everybody has some anxiety, everybody has mental issues, and you can blame men for it. The toxic masculinity is the reason why you're going through this because men didn't want to step up to their responsibilities. They didn't do it. If they did, we wouldn't be doing this video now and we wouldn't be talking about how, sorry a lot of these men are. They were so bad they made the women bad, you know, because it's like they had to overcompensate and then they started saying, well, hell, if a man can do it, I'm going to do it. Who are you going to blame for that? And no men stepped up, and then the ones that tried to step up were even worse than the ones that were messing up because they're in a position of public trust. And guess what? You didn't do your job. Okay? You didn't do your job. You didn't stand up as a man. We're all going to make mistakes. But if you didn't stand up as a man and take that position of saying, look, I'm going to build my family off of this foundation and I'm not going to waver from that. And I don't get some of these clowns that's in relationships and marriages, especially marriages. If you have a wife, why are you looking at her? If I'm married and I'm in love and all of that, don't know other woman exists except the one that's in my house and so forth. And if she gives me a reason not to, then I'm a free agent again. But other than that, I'm sorry. I'd rather have just that one than to have 10 of nothing. You know what I'm saying? There's less people to get on my nerves. There's less people that I got to sit over there and cater to. And there's less people that I have to deal with. That's just me. I'm just an outlier. I'm not going to say that I haven't been through that before and all this other stuff, but if you put logic to it, you really change the game with that. But yeah, I mean, I'm probably going to have to do another video to it. It's getting long and so forth. And I haven't covered everything, but at least I gave you a beginning of how this chaos happened, how men dropped the ball, okay, in some cases dropped their balls, and we've gone into this position where women have to be alpha men instead of alpha women, and you know everything is disjointed, not only in this country but in this world. How do we correct it? Is it going to be corrected? You tell me. I'm just a guy on YouTube. Until next time.